Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
Weeds have one main purpose in life, and no, it's not to annoy you or me. The purpose of a weed is to reproduce. So today, during our Farm Basics time, we're going to talk a little about how do weeds reproduce.
Well, there are several different ways that plants can reproduce. Let's go with the obvious, producing seed. So for an annual weed, many times this is the case. They want to grow, put on a seed head, and spread their seed, and that's it. So let's just say that the weed has a tough year and maybe it can't emerge from the ground and it's late and it gets up and it's only a few inches tall. Well, it doesn't have to necessarily be 5 feet tall in order for it to reproduce. So many times, even those weeds that come up later in the season, for whatever reason, they could still be small, but they'll get at least one viable seed on it so they can reproduce and try again next year.
All right, with annual weeds, they pretty much only reproduce by seeds. But then we have other weeds like biennials and especially perennials. The perennials are kind of where we want to focus here because they have a number of different ways they can spread through a field and effectively reproduce. And rhizomes, that's the thing that I guess I wanted to talk about a little bit because one of my least favorite weeds is Canada thistle. When Darren and I were growing up on the farm, we had to fight Canada thistle all the time. And so we'd go out there with hoes. And so you'd hoe out that Canada thistle plant and another one would pop up over here and another one would pop up over there. Well, what was happening is below the ground, there were these rhizomes that would go and then put up new plants. So you can kill one of the plants, one of the heads there, and you'd think, oh, I've got this weed. No, you don't, because of this great big extensive rhizome system below ground. That's one of the ways that Canada thistle can spread.
Back to talking about seed, that's one of those things about plants that produce seed. Well, a lot of those seeds will germinate next year, but some of the seeds may stick around in the soil for several years. And they may be buried in the soil and they can hold intact and not decay or rot for quite a few years. So just because you stopped a weed this year, if it did go to seed, doesn't mean you aren't going to face that weed coming down the road.
All right, there's also stolons and tubers that I guess I wanted to address real quickly. Stolons are basically rhizomes, but they're running above ground. And tubers, kind of think of carrots, for example. So it's just a little bit different way for a plant to reproduce, and you're going to have something below the ground instead of seeds above the ground.
Well, there are a lot of different ways that weeds can reproduce. There are a lot of different ways that plants in general can reproduce. It's important to understand the weed that you're trying to control and how it goes to seed. That way you understand, hey, timing is so important because I have to stop it before it goes through that reproductive phase.
Well, it is important to identify how the plant can reproduce because you don't want weeds to reproduce at all. We'll talk about our Weed of the Week and how that reproduces coming up later in the show.